Yeah, first thing I think about, I mean, just one word is boundaries. And
Mm.
just knowing that if you don't get those boundaries right on the front end, it's gonna put you in a lot of situations that you wish you wouldn't have been in.
Let's be honest. Dating is hard. And as a Christian man seeking to honor God in every single part of your life, dating can prove to be even more difficult. And in this episode of the Men to Men podcast, we're going to be having a conversation with my two friends, Raph and Micah, as we talk about the two things that are going to help you succeed in your Christian dating relationship. And hey, if we're meeting for the first time, my name is James Howard Jr., and I'd like to thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Men to Men podcast. We're all about helping men honor God in every single part of their lives. So, if that sounds like something that you would be interested in, I want you to consider subscribing. And if you're listening to this on any of the audio platforms, I want to encourage you to go ahead and leave a comment, a like, a heart, or whatever you need to do to show some love to this podcast. So let's jump into this episode of the Men to Men podcast. And so, just off the top of y'all's head, before we get into the specific questions, man, what would you guys say is your number one thing as far as advice for dating for Christian men who are seeking to date right and to honor God in their dating? What is one thing that you say, hey man, you got to get this right before you dive into any relationship?
You can go first, Raf.
Yeah, first thing I think about, I mean, just one word is boundaries. And
Mm.
just knowing that if you don't get those boundaries right on the front end, it's gonna put you in a lot of situations that you wish you wouldn't have been in. But if you
Yeah.
get those boundaries right, it's gonna save you a lot of heartache and temptations and things that you probably didn't have to face as a result of it. So, I mean, things that you would have faced as a result of it. So thankful for the boundaries that me and Tierra created in our marriage, in our dating relationship. I mean, and I think without those things, whether it's boundaries between us, boundaries and saying like, hey, like, look, we're gonna make sure that we do X, Y, and Z to keep us from, this, all those things. So boundaries is the first thing that I think comes to mind for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, man, I would say knowing yourself. Um, and to me, that extends to like a lot of different things in terms of like, I think it's important for, and I told one of my friends who he was engaged before, well, he had gotten engaged, but I was telling him, man, like, it's one of the things that I really wish I would have done before I proposed or got married was
Mm,
like going to therapy. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
To help understand myself better, like, you can understand your triggers, you can understand what areas that you need to set boundaries in, kind of um, paralleling with what Raf said, man, just knowing yourself, knowing your weak areas, knowing where you need to be held accountable, knowing what situations to put yourself in and what situations to stay out of.
Mm.
Man, I think being familiar with yourself, and even just being able to communicate that to your significant other, man, so y'all can know each other
yeah.
more, is super
Is
super
this is
important.
this the podcast where we can interject and just talk? Can we just, bring it out of there? You
Yeah.
know
Hey,
what I mean?
We just
hey,
we just
I
talking,
mean,
man.
just to go to that tip of, knowing yourself. I think, when we know like where we are in relation to God, like, are we
Mm.
really pursuing the Lord? That would be a great indicator if we should even pursue a spouse or pursue a dating relationship.
facts,
And I
facts.
think
Yeah.
that that's been a thing for me. It's like, man, a lot of the dating relationships I had, man, I was pursuing the flesh.
Oh yeah.
And
Hey.
that would have stopped me from a lot of temptation and sin if I just would have been like, you know what,
Yep.
I'm not, me and God, like, he's not a friend, he's not the lover of my soul, therefore I shouldn't be pursuing something else because this is now the idol, the God that I've made and that I've worshiped.
Yeah, that's good stuff, man. Two things on that, man. Um, I think what you said, Micah, about just knowing yourself. Pastor Tony Evans, man, I'm stuck on Tony Evans right now. His podcast, his books. I'm actually going through Kingdom Men Rising with another group of men. I'm pretty excited about. And one thing he talks about as far as marriage is concerned, he says that marriage is not about two half people coming together to make a whole
Mm,
person.
mm,
He's like, that ain't marriage. Like he's like, that's like, why would you want to bring a half person to
yeah.
something? It's about two whole people being brought into a unity that makes an amazing
Mm.
relationship between you, them, and God. And it's just like, why would you want to offer somebody
Yeah.
half? Why would you want to be in a relationship where you would need that person to complete you? I mean, and I understand we all have our
Yeah.
weaknesses and we all have our strengths, and that's
Yeah.
good for a
Yeah.
marriage. But when it comes to like the core of who you are, if you're seeking to become a full person uh through somebody else other than God,
Yeah.
like you setting yourself up, and you setting your future spouse up for a lot of heartache
Yeah.
and a lot of
Yeah.
trouble. Because I
Yeah.
mean, who want to deal with a whole bunch of mess, right?
Man.
And then the second thing on that one, so y'all was gonna say something.
Nah,
No,
that
no,
was
no,
good.
Yeah,
no. Yeah, you
yeah.
going in right now, bro.
Nah. And then I was gonna say, I forgot the second thing I was gonna say. Ah, man. Oh yeah, and I think for me, what right before my right before I met my wife, or right as I was meeting my wife, because I met her and I was not trying to date her at all. Like she had a boyfriend. I had a old girlfriend from like middle school I was trying to get at, who lived in Atlanta and all that kind of stuff, man. And so I was just so focused on trying to get what I felt or I thought I
Yeah.
wanted. Um, and man, God had done some stuff in me. It was my first year of college where God just, man, he rocked
Mm.
me and just changed me and changed my perspective on just the relationship. And like you were saying, Mike, it just, I had to work on me. And I got to the point where I was just like, you know what, forget trying to chase a relationship or trying to chase something that I want. And I really just started working on myself,
Yeah.
man. And out of that
Mm.
came, why I mean, like I said, I met my wife, and then I realized later, like, yo, Shawty kind of bad. Like, hey,
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
and I'm fine. As a man, I was growing. God had taken a lot of stuff out of me, and then that helped. And God was doing stuff in her too, to the point where we came together. And it was something beautiful, man, because we both were two whole people.
Yeah.
We weren't perfect, but we were two whole people
Yeah.
who had worked through
Yeah.
a lot of the junk that we had dealt with, and it really helped our dating relationship for sure.
Yeah, I was gonna say I can
Yeah.
relate to that, no doubt. Because for me and Tierra, I knew Tierra in high school, and she friend zoned me in high school, and I was wilding. I was
Mm.
on the fence. Then I get to college, first year of college. You know how that is. You be wilding. First taste of freedom for me was sheltered as a child, and then just kind of the Lord and His providence and sovereignty drawing near to me, making Himself known, and then I started following Him. I started pursuing Him as a result of that. And I remember during that time, like just not even thinking about women, like just saying like, God, you are my priority. Like, and they say a man who finds a wife finds a good thing, but I think a man who finds God finds a good thing, and from that relationships gets good things. And so like
Right, right, right.
I remember not even thinking about it, and then Tierra, like the church I was going to, our old building that we were using, we were allowing another church to use it. This was her church, and so we ran into each
Mm.
other. I would be getting out of service, she'd be getting in, and still didn't think nothing of it. Then she inboxed me on Facebook. So I mean, I know we're gonna talk about dating apps, which Facebook
Hey.
wasn't really that, but it was that for your boy. You know what I'm saying?
Nah, you can make
She
it
came
that.
into them DMs, boy, and it was just like my eye,
Slid on up in there.
Slid
my
on up
eyes
in
was
there.
wide open. I said, "Yes, Lord, I see it." But I wasn't focused on her though. Like, and the Lord
Yeah,
really, like,
yeah,
as I was pursuing Him, really had to kind of put her in my way in some ways for me to see. And I think that because we were both pursuing the Lord wholeheartedly, it
yeah,
made our relationship that much better, as opposed to being in all the mess and not, having myself together. It would have. I mean, the Lord probably would have taken care of us, and we would have been straight, but it would have been a lot of heartache that came with that. And so I feel
yeah,
like the start is so crucial to the sustaining and the finishing well, that I think a lot of people don't think about.
I can add to that because I definitely feel like my story is very similar to both of y'all's. Like where, like I remember, um, it was in that period, Ref. I think when we had the house
Safe house number two.
on Park
Yep.
Ave. We had the house on
Yep.
Park Ave, and you know what I'm saying. I'm committed to the Lord for sure, but I'm still like, well, let me say, when I say committed, I don't mean like 100. I ain't 100% in, you know what I'm saying, but
yeah.
I'm
At
interested
least about 75.
in
Right.
yeah, like I'm interested, like I'm I'm seeing girls. I'm like, I want to talk to her. I want to talk to her. I'm interested in this one. Interested in that one. And because I realized, like, I'm like, man, I'm getting older. Like I'm starting to think about marriage. You know what I'm saying? And so, like, through a couple different situations that thankfully didn't work out, with a couple of women that I was speaking to at the
Praise God.
time. It was funny because sometimes, Rev, they would be at the house. I mean, nothing would happen, but they would be at the house, and I don't even think y'all knew.
Yeah.
It would be sometimes you and Kowalski was gone or whatever. So like, but it was a couple girls I was
Sweet.
talking to. It didn't work out,
Yeah.
thankfully. But I did get to a place where like I was like, man, what am I doing? Like,
Yeah.
let me chill, let me relax. And so like I was like, I'm single, but I was like, I need to be preparing to like
Mm,
be somebody's husband,
mm,
right?
That's
Like,
good.
so let me dig in the word. Let me find some good resources, like Christian resources. So I was on YouTube a lot, just like I don't like I was on YouTube a lot, looking up a bunch of different sermons about being a man of God and being a husband. Um, Read a couple books that I probably wouldn't recommend now, but at the time I felt like it was helpful for me, just like to have like a younger person's perspective on like dating
relationship
and
goals.
marriage in a way that like made sense to me and wasn't something that I felt like would be harmful at the time. But in that period is when I became aware of the woman who I would eventually marry. Like I saw my wife in that period, and it's just like all of that stuff like just seemed to like work out perfectly in terms of like the timing. And so yeah, like paralleling y'all's story, you know what I'm saying? Like for sure, like at first I was wilding. I wasn't going too crazy, but eventually I was just like, man, like what am I doing? I'm getting, I ain't getting no younger. Like I'm getting older. I need to find somebody to settle. Well, I hope I can come across somebody to settle down with. And it was, when I really started focusing on like my relationship with the Lord and actually like looking at, okay, like how do I do this
Yeah.
right? Because I did feel like ever since I started dating, like it had always been wrong. Even if I did have the intentions of like uh having a holy dating relationship, it still never worked out. Um, and so once I really started pressing into that, my wife came. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the biggest things, the biggest tip, like if if y'all who watching don't hear anything else, like it's boundaries. Like boundaries is a big deal. In that, yeah, you work on yourself, you do all that kind of stuff, but once you're in a relationship, man, like the reality of the fact that we have hormones
Man.
and we feel what we feel and we want to have the sex and all that kind of stuff, man. It's just like it's real. It don't matter how holy,
Yeah.
how much you know
Yeah.
yourself, how much you know the
Yeah.
Lord. If you're not putting yourself, setting yourself up to win, is what I like to say, man. You're gonna fall into it. You just really are, man. So
Facts though.
Yeah.
Facts.
boundaries, accountability, people outside of that relationship, man, who can look at both of y'all and just be real with y'all, man. I would say, man, it's probably the most important uh, advice that you can have as a young Christian man or Christian woman, if you're listening, going into a dating relationship is boundaries and accountability, like hands down. Like
Yeah.
nothing else matters if you don't have those things set,
Man.
man.
The spirit is willing, but the
Yeah,
flesh is weak. Come on. That's
very weak.
Having dudes around you that can check you, that can ask you questions, or just be present. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I feel like that. I'm sure we'll get into that, but yeah, that was super, super key for
Yeah,
sure.
it make a difference, man, when you know that you're gonna have to go look somebody in the eye, man to man, and be like, yeah, so me and my girl was by ourselves, and Netflix was on, um,
We was
but
chilling,
we
but
was chilling,
Y'all
right?
wasn't chilling.
It,
y'all
yeah,
y'all was
right.
active.
Right, very active. So, but it makes a difference when you have to, you have to go tell somebody that, and have to deal with the fact of doing that. Just that in its base is just good, and then the spiritual side of it, man, is even better. Again, I'd like to thank you for checking out this episode of the Men to Men podcast. If you're listening to this on the audio platform, don't forget to leave a comment, leave a like, a heart, or whatever you need to do to show this podcast some love. And if you're watching this on YouTube, don't forget to smash the like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss any other future videos that we have. If you would like more tips on how to honor God in every single part of your life, I want you to go ahead and click this video on the screen now. We'll see you over there.